Kia ora koutou, no mai haere mai. Welcome to Te Pūtiaki Manataonga webinar about digital and distance learning today. We're very excited to be welcoming some colleagues from Canberra in Australia today. As usual, we will start with a karakia and then I'll introduce our guest speakers. Whakataka te hau ki te uru, whakataka te hau ki te tonga, kia mā kina kina ki uta, kia mā taratara ki tai, e hi aki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hauhu, ti hei mauri ora. So we're absolutely delighted to be able to introduce you to three amazing educators working over the ditch, some friends in Australia. We're going to hear from two national organisations who have got some really interesting digital programs. So first of all, we will be hearing from Robert Bunzil, who's the Manager of Digital Learning Programs at the National Portrait Gallery of Australia. He's going to share some examples of the different types of digital programs on offer at the gallery and take us on a journey behind the scenes at the gallery and tell us where their digital programming began and how it's been developed and enhanced over time. Then after that, we'll hear from Mirah Lambert, Education Manager at the National Gallery of Australia, and her colleague Krystal Hurst, who's the lead Indigenous arts educator there. They're going to share some examples of the range of digital programs on offer at the gallery and include an insight into the Indigenous education principles that guide their practice and ways to encourage interactivity in digital programming. I'd like to encourage everybody to put your questions and comments in the chat box, and we can save some time at the end of these presentations to answer any questions you might have. We, as always, are recording this webinar and we're going to blur out guest faces, and we'll be posting it on our website and our YouTube channel for those people who aren't able to attend this live event. We'll also be receiving slide stacks from our guest speakers and posting those on the resource page of our website, so you can refer back to them after this event. So without further ado, I will hand over to Robert.
There we go. Thank you so much for that introduction. It's wonderful to be here with our New Zealand colleagues. My name is Robert Bunzil, and I'm broadcasting today from the lands of the Ngunnawal and Ngambri peoples, the local Indigenous peoples of the Canberra area. So I would just like to acknowledge their elders, past, present, and emerging, and to acknowledge their continuing connection to the lands and the waters and the skies of this beautiful local Canberra area. I was going to be doing this presentation, sorry, just getting underway. I was going to be doing this presentation with Karen Vickery, who is our Director of Access and Learning, but unfortunately she's been called away on urgent business. So you're stuck with me for the next 20 minutes. But I'm hoping to make this an interesting presentation. It's a bit of an image fest. I've got a lot of slides and I'm going to whiz through them to try and give you a bit of an overview of what the Portrait Gallery has experienced over the last 6 years, and a lot of the technology changes that have happened over the last probably 2 years that have completely changed the way we are engaging with our audiences outside of Canberra. We started very low end, and I think that perhaps that is of interest to the people who are part of this webinar, how you can do things from a very low end perspective, because smaller institutions and even larger institutions quite often are hampered by a lack of space, a lack of technical expertise, a lack of equipment, all of those things which make getting into digital broadcasting quite daunting and perhaps complex. So I'm going to try and take you through some of the high-end stuff that we do and try and draw out some ideas for how you might access digital and distance audiences using equipment that you might have at hand. So I'm just going to share my screen. There we go. So this is the National Portrait Gallery in Canberra. It's a beautiful building in the Parliamentary Triangle on the shores of Lake Burley-Griffin here in the National Capital of Australia. Just a little bit of background on me, because I think this is quite, will give a little bit of a perspective. I originally started in digital broadcasting for education audiences in 2009 at the Questacon at the National Science and Technology Centre in Canberra. And by the end of 4 years, we had built a dedicated digital studio on the right-hand side there, and also equipped our theatre with digital broadcast capabilities. That's on the left-hand side there. And we did some very large broadcasts to video conference audiences, mainly schools all around Australia and also overseas. So this is fairly high-end stuff. I then moved to the National Museum of Australia, where I had a project where we developed this museum robot, which autonomously moved around the museum, giving guided tours to people around the world and around Australia with a panoramic camera. And it was a very immersive experience. So it was, I think it was $3.5 million, that project originally, to get it off the ground. So very high end. But then I moved over to the National Portrait Gallery 2 years ago, and this was the digital studio that we were working with at the time. So I'll just stop that for a second. So the National Portrait Gallery put its foot into digital learning about 6 years ago, and it was video conference based. So H323, you had to have a Polycom or a Cisco box, and the schools that could connect to you were the schools that had a video conference box. The Portrait Gallery really didn't have much budget for this, and they had borrowed equipment, secondhand equipment from auctions, and started really small and gradually built up with green screens. And that studio that you saw there was a converted office that happened to become free with a bit of green material on the walls. And eventually, over the years, they built up technical capability with different cameras and different mixing equipment to provide an immersive learning experience. And this was one of the reasons I moved over to the Portrait Gallery, was I wanted to see how they were doing this cutting edge immersive stuff, where they were putting their presenters directly into the galleries of the National Portrait Gallery. And I was intrigued by that. So that's what I wanted to find out about. Unfortunately, 2 months after I got there, the equipment that they were using was now about 10 years old and stopped working. So, but here's some images of that, that studio being used with virtual backgrounds and some interesting interactive techniques. We have now built a new digital studio, and we commissioned this just this week. And it's in our basement. It's fully soundproofed. We've got a huge amount of equipment. I went down there yesterday afternoon with one of our learning facilitators and took these photos so that I could whack them into the PowerPoint presentation. It's got green painted walls. It's got all the bells and whistles. But the reality is it doesn't do anything much that is technically greatly different from the old studio, but it is dedicated. It's got its own space, its own equipment, and we're out of the office area, and we're going to make great use of it. But a converted office with low scale technology can do very much what we can do in our brand new digital studio. When our equipment stopped working, just after I got there, I had a bit of experience from the museum of mobile broadcasting from within gallery spaces. So if you're coming in from a gallery or a museum, you might want to consider this sort of thing. Initially, there we go. Initially, on the left, I used a catering trolley with a laptop, a Mac laptop, and I connected a camera that we had to the laptop, and I shared a PowerPoint screen. We got a perfectly great live immersive experience in the galleries, very engaging, very immediate, coming from this setup. But it proved to be so popular that we decided to build our own dedicated trolley on the right-hand side there with a few more bells and whistles. But essentially that high end on the right-hand side does the same job as the low end on the left-hand side. So the National Portrait Gallery over the last 6 years has developed a whole suite of virtual education programs. Now these are in a whole range of different areas. One that you would obviously assume that we do is art making workshops and aligning with the visual arts criteria, curriculum of the Australian National Curriculum. But we also, as a portrait gallery, are able to deliver programs on Australian culture, Australian society, Indigenous society. We can align with the civics and citizenship curriculum using the 3,000 portraits of famous Australians within our collection. Before our lockdown, we've had a number of lockdowns here in Canberra and across Australia. Before our lockdown, we were mainly dealing with classes dialing in. You can see the classes in the top left-hand corner there, entire classes dialing in where you can present to 30 or 60 students all in one go, and they can have a group experience. During our lockdown experience, we were having schools dial in with anywhere from 60 to 150 students in one session. And there are unique challenges to that sort of digital program. One of them is managing the input from the students who, well, everything from individual students unmuting themselves and coming on screen, or doing funny things on camera, putting strange things into the chat function. So what we found was, as we were all working from home, we dispersed our production, and we would have maybe four producers, each with a dedicated task as we broadcast. So we would have a producer who was doing the hosting, a producer who's doing admitting and monitoring of the users, another who was dedicated to interacting on the chat function. And we would all be dialing in from our spare rooms and lounge rooms and sometimes bedrooms all around Canberra and the south coast of New South Wales. One of the core features of a National Portrait Gallery virtual program is active learning. And so we go to great lengths to embed interactivity and engagement techniques throughout our presentations. A lot of this, because we are a portrait gallery, relates to visual arts. So we have all sorts of drawing warm-up activities, self-portrait making, and these deepen your engagement with your audience. If you're coming in from a museum or another institution, you may find a way to embed an interactive technique that is relevant to your institution. This is a public program where people dialed in to draw portraits, or paint portraits, I should say, on pebbles. And people all around Australia dialed in and were making their pebble portraits with us. Lee in the top right-hand corner there is not in the gallery. That's a virtual background. More on that later. Down in the bottom right-hand corner here, you can see Carolyn engaging with a portrait in a virtual background. This is a key feature of what we do in our presentations. I'll stop sharing for a moment. So that often what we will do is bring up a portrait as a PowerPoint slide or an image slide so that people can slow look and see it in great detail. But engagement often requires your audience to see you using your hands and making eye contact with them. So the simple technique of creating a virtual background with the image that you're talking about, and then bringing that up so that you can get back on screen and engage with your audience is a very powerful thing. And these techniques were really difficult before all the webcasting technology came in. So now we're using WebEx, Teams, BlueJeans, Skype, and Zoom, and we can create our own virtual backgrounds. And you can be in an immersive environment and talk to your background far more easily than you were able to do even just a couple of years ago. And you can put yourself digitally into your own gallery spaces and take people on a guided tour without actually being there and without disrupting the activities of what's going on site. There is something to actually being in a gallery space and broadcasting from there, and having people, your visitors, walking around behind you and actually hearing some of the gallery space. There's an immediacy and engagement that comes from that. But if you're delivering many, many virtual programs to schools, sometimes you need a controlled environment. Do give me an idea of how my timing's going as well, because I've probably lost track. So I suppose one of the learnings that we've got is that engagement is actually pretty easy once you learn a few simple techniques. One of these is if you can get, I'll just go back, if you can get a separate camera and not be using just the webcam that's on your laptop or your computer, you can get yourself into the picture in a full body sense like this, and actually engage with your audience using all of your body language and not just your head and shoulders, so that you're not just a talking head. And this can really help you engage with your audience. And you can see at the end of a presentation, sometimes you get wild interaction and appreciation from your audiences. I would suggest you have a think about having fun and being a bit performative, maybe using a little bit of costuming, really engaging with your backgrounds, and having a playful sense of humor. I would dare you, I won't give you the time to do it, but I would dare you to look here and see which of these are virtual environments and which of these are real environments. It is actually hard to tell, and I actually have to look carefully to work that out. And a little bit of costuming and a little bit of joie de vivre goes a long way in engaging with your audiences, which puts your audiences in a much more receptive mood for a learning experience. And video works for almost all audiences, and this was one that surprised me. We started trialing an early childhood program, and you can see our learning facilitator Marina there in the top left and also on the right, engaging with tots from age 6 months to 2 years. And surprisingly, if you carefully tailor your content, you can actually engage with difficult audiences. And in this case, of course, you're also engaging with the parents and carers as well. I'd just like to give a very quick case study of a public program that we have running at the Portrait Gallery, which is a series of art making workshops. We do these once every 3 months. We pull in a practicing artist, and we get them to run a 2-hour session by Zoom on one aspect of art. And in this instance, it's line drawing. You can see the people on the left-hand side there at the end of the 2-hour workshop are sharing what they've come up with. In this particular one, we had 800 people book in for this workshop, and we had screens and screens of people just so keen to share what they had learned over the 2 hours of the workshop, screens and screens of them. We have done these workshops in a range of different temporary venues where we've set up a range of different equipment depending on the workshop, pulling in staff from across the Portrait Gallery from different teams because we don't have a dedicated broadcast team, and pulling in equipment from all over as well. You can see some of the different venues that we've done our workshops in. And I'll just very quickly play a little bit of video of
I love to use the measurements and the proportions, and, you know, just little things like having an eye space between the two eyes is important, and the nose is the width of the space between the two eyes. Just all these little simple tricks that are spelled out to my students in a live workshop.
I shall stop sharing that one now. Running video can sometimes have its little glitches. One thing I would suggest if you're engaging with schools is to make sure you engage with the teacher ahead of time. Make sure they're fully prepped. They know what your lesson plan is going to be and how they can be an on-site facilitator for you. You do not need the teacher at the back of the room. You need them at the computer so that they can be managing the class for you, and can be calling students up to present their work to you, and can select the students who are going to answer the questions that you pose to them. That is an absolutely critical part of our distance learning programs, engaging with the teacher. Also, another critical question is, do you lock down your learning programs so that they are consistent and you can teach other people within your organization to deliver that session, and the presentation is exactly how it's going to be, word perfect with a script? There are many advantages to that. And most institutions that I know in Australia do sort of follow that model on the whole, because it's replicatable, it's predictable, you've got quality control, and you can train your staff to deliver it. And if a staff member's not there one day, someone else can pick that up. There is a power, though, to having a more flexible approach. And at the Portrait Gallery, we do both of these models, where you empower your educators and learning facilitators to tailor their programs to the specific audience who are dialing in, whether that's age and year level at school, or whether that's the subject that they're studying, or some preferences that the teachers may have outlined to you. In our case, it might be that it's a Year 9 class coming in from Queensland, and they would like to have some famous Queenslanders as part of the program. There is an immediacy to being able to tailor your product if you have the luxury of time and resources. So that is a question that most institutions have to grapple with, the predictability and the flexibility, and there are advantages to both. I'll just finish my PowerPoint presentation and then we'll be able to pass over. Yeah. I don't know how my timing's going. You're going to have to tell me. I'd just like to talk for a little moment about accessibility. Our education program at the Portrait Gallery is called, the section that manages it is access and learning. So we take accessibility very, very seriously. And over the last 2 years, we have been embedding, where we can, Auslan or sign interpretation into some of our presentations, auto captioning. Through Zoom and other programs, you can have machine learned captioning, which is an easy function to turn on and off for people who have a hearing impairment. If you are doing a high-end, high-quality broadcast, you may want to actually engage a captioning company to provide the captioning so that you get more accurate captioning, because the machine learning does not often get complicated words right. So we have done a lot in terms of embedding these sort of accessibility features, and we have done it through specialized equipment, like on the right here, one of our video editing desks. If you don't have this equipment, you can access video editing software such as OBS, free off the internet, which will do everything that this $15,000 box that we bought secondhand will do. So this allows you to put picture in picture and arrange your screen the way you want it, and enables green screen immersive techniques as well. Accessibility is not just about a disability. Accessibility is reaching out to audiences who may not be able to either make it to our institution because we're in Canberra, or they may not have the may not have other ways of getting to see us. And some of our audiences are in the bottom right-hand side there. Hospital schools, homeschooled students who miss out on a lot of benefits of being at school. Of course, Australia is a huge country, so there are people who are at distance disadvantage. We are trying to reach out to aged care audiences, people with dementia, early childhood, prison schools, a whole range of different audiences who would normally find it hard to access our programs. And just finishing off, one of our key learnings over the last couple of years simple digital technology allows you to do so many different things. So just be nimble. And this very quick example, I was broadcasting with Marina in the middle there, who was at home during lockdown, and we had a bomb scare, and people opened the door of the studio and said I had to evacuate. So I picked up my laptop, walked down the corridor, down the stairs and outside the building, and we just kept broadcasting because we were just dependent on a laptop. And so you're able to be nimble and take into your stride things that happen. Thank you very much. I look forward to any questions.
Yay, thank you, Robert. That's great. I love that story about the bomb scare. And I can just imagine you running outside with your laptop, carrying on your discussion.
Pretty weird.
Go educators. I think all of us have got that amazing nimbleness and flexibility sort of hardwired into us somehow. So we've had one question in the chat, and another person, Anne, has raised her hand, but I think we'll save questions for your presentation until the end, if that's okay with everybody. So we'll hand over now to the National Gallery, and we're going to start with Mirah. Welcome, Mirah.
Thanks, Helen, and hello, everyone. I'm just going to get up my PowerPoint, but it's great to see you all, and thank you for inviting us to be part of this. It's great to be able to share our learnings about digital excursions and our journey of working with schools in particular. As Robert was mentioning at the end there, we have also been reaching out and doing digital programs with Access audiences and various other, and our Art and Dementia program we took online over lockdown and in the last few months. But we're going to focus on schools today, but certainly I know our colleagues would be happy to share more of that story with you at another time too. But look, I wanted to start by just letting you know that if there are any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who are joining us on this presentation today, there are artworks, images and names of deceased people that are part of this presentation. But look, first of all, we're here at the National Gallery, as you can see I am, and I would like to begin by paying my respects to the Ngunnawal and the Ngambri people, the first people of the Canberra region, and to pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. And how working in a cultural institution, and one that has the largest and most significant collection of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander art in the world, that it is a privilege and something that I'm proud to be able to do, to be able to share First Nations culture, as well as the art and culture from around Australia and around the world as well, through the National Gallery's art collection. And I'm joined by my colleague Krystal Hurst, who's our lead Indigenous artist educator, and she'll come in a little bit later and tell you more too about one of our programs, particularly that has developed in the last few years, that focuses on First Nations. But look, we're here, and it was wonderful to hear the Maori introduction at the beginning there. And of course, there are many First Nations across Australia. And so while we don't have a bilingual program, we are looking at ways in which we can incorporate First Nations language into our programs wherever possible. But we're down here in Ngunnawal and Ngambri country, as we mentioned before, in Canberra. But look, to get onto our digital learning journey with schools, we want to take you a little bit through our motivation, our audience, looking at our intent and our strategies, how we've iterated, and the extensions that we're either beginning to make or that are coming into the future as well. So look, where to start? Well, of course, within our corporate plan, and a lot of us are guided by those strategic documents of our organisation. One is to transform digital engagement online, on site and on tour. So we're looking at how our digital programs can reach into schools, but also how they support our on-tour program, and also how we provide digital experiences on site. But as well as doing this one, we're in the process of organising an online teacher professional learning program for an exhibition from the National Gallery and Wesfarmers collection that's opening in Perth soon, and we'll do a digital exchange with them. So there's a lot of things that we're doing, but we've been doing schools digital excursions, which we'll talk to more. And of course, we want to grow and broaden audiences. But look, we started out in late 2019 with a pilot with the Canberra Hospital School. And, you know, as Robert mentioned, those groups that can, students that can't access the gallery, it's a great way to enable them to still have access to the collection and learning opportunities when they're on an extended hospital stay. But it's also quite low stakes. You've got small groups, there are very forgiving audiences as you work through some of the technical hiccups and refining how you do create digital learning experiences. And then also a major other significant moment was when in early 2020, we went into lockdown following with COVID, that we went into looking at how we develop and co-present with 2 artist educators at home in different locations in a very low-tech way using slide sets. But what was our intent with these digital excursions is very much informed by what we generally do at the gallery. We want to create interactive and engaging experiences with art. We want to develop critical and creative thinking. We want to elevate artists and their work. And we always have a focus on First Nations. But there are also some things within that the medium can offer that allows you to do different things as well. So while we can share the work of significant Australian artists, for example, such as Grace Cossington Smith's The Bridge in Building, we can also share things like delicate plan and process drawings and things like that, where normally this type of material has a very limited time on display because of its fragility and light sensitivity, but we can keep it and share it in our digital excursions for as long as we like. No 3-month conservation, you know, limitation on this one. And also, it's a way in which we can show behind the scenes and allow people to see what it does take to hang a 5-metre by 2-metre mammoth painting like Jackson Pollock's Blue Poles, and the fact that it takes incredible care from 4 very skilled people to get this painting up and down off the wall. But look, who is this for? And as I mentioned before, we're focusing particularly on our audiences for schools and our school programs today. But we do, and as Robert mentioned too, we've been grappling with the differences and similarities of presenting to students together in the classroom, but also when they've been doing remote learning from home, and how technically that might be slightly different. And the responses, you know, when you've got more people online, that chat can go crazy, or you know, when you see the energy in one room when they're all together too, it's sometimes harder to replicate when they're all in their different locations. But also we do have the benefit of a national curriculum that we can connect to, which means that programs that we develop can be equally relevant right across the country. So in terms of our strategies, they're also similar to what we do in the gallery and on the floor. We take an inquiry learning approach, and we will use questioning and discussion-based techniques to try and elicit responses from students. And so in the same way as we do that in small groups on the floor, we can do that when we've got a class group that have joined a digital excursion just with their class. But we've also had to adapt to scaling up for mass participation events, such as the one that we can see on screen here, where one of our other artist educators, Annika Romin, was delivering to 10,000 people on Zoom, and another 9,000 or so were watching in the overflow space on a YouTube live link. But you can see from the slide here, we've got a big question, and quite often that big question is something that frames our programs. And so this is the Art in Focus program, which looks at the role of artists in our society. And so within the digital excursion, when we do it with a class, we might ask them and get their responses. But when you've got 10,000 or more people, instead we had to adapt to using polls. And so multiple choice answers where actually as people respond when they're online, you can see the graph, the shifting responses as people are responding to that, and you get an overview of what those questions are. But of course, given that they're quite limited answers, in something like a digital excursion, it can be a point of reference to then get people thinking, and then for the presenter to talk and speak beyond to. But also we use things like visible thinking strategies and things like that, where also processes and things like a sequence of look, think and create is something that we use in our resources, and we will also use in our digital excursions or similarly in programs on the floor. So quite often, if we're not having art making as directly as part of the sessions, and it is with some of our sessions like digital drawing that we do and things like that, but at other times we'll introduce a number of artists from the collection and then leave the class to go on with a creative activity following the time that they've had with us, which is usually a 60-minute session. And so we can see here, this is how we finish our Art in Focus program after they've had a look at Jackson Pollock as well as a number of other artists. We invite them to look at creating their own unique art making and painting tools. And of course, knowing that people might not have a great deal of art materials at their disposal, but they might have some coloured paints or inks together with different recycled materials that you could find at home or in the classroom. Look at building up layers and colours to then create your own artwork. And so after we did our mass digital excursion, we actually did get quite a few responses sent through to us, shared on social media, and also sent to our learning@nga.gov.au address. And we were really pleased to see how students had been inspired, jumped straight onto their art materials and got making, which is always great to see. But look, now I'd like to hand over to my colleague, to Krystal Hurst, and get her to speak to you a bit more about the Art Ways of Learning program, and also share some of the works that form part of that program as we deliver it online and or in the galleries. Over to you, Krystal.
Thanks, Mirah. Good evening, everyone. Hello. It's really great to connect with you all today. And I'll just talk a little bit about, our Art Ways program and also our Art Ways principles that informs the way we do our on-site and digital learning, but also give you a little bit of an insight into our digital program as well. So we'll take you a little bit on a journey today. So our Art Ways of Learning program is an Indigenous-based program, and where we try to aim to promote, celebrate and enrich learning about Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists and arts practice as well here at the National Gallery. And we really want to really show how we do our programs here. So you can see here on the right where we did have our on-site program, where we were responding to artworks here in the collection. And also we had local Indigenous students come on site and do some poster making and looking at the power of words as well. So we're really excited about this program as well. And so what underpins our Art Ways of Learning program is our 5 principles. And what really is at the core of these principles is Indigenous ways of knowing, being and doing. And so it's really about how Indigenous people know the world in which we live in, how we do things in the world and how we be in this world. And those philosophies really speak to how we do arts learning. So we really love to create memorable experiences for students, and we can really do that also in the digital space as well. And to create those memorable experiences, it's focusing on learning through culture, not just about culture. And that's one of our key frameworks for really focusing on how we know, be, and do. And we really do focus on how we teach as well as what we teach as well, to really encourage appreciation and creativity amongst the students. And we also promote living artists as well. So ensuring that we have living artists who are engaged in our programs, whether it's co-delivering or utilising their voice in a lot of our presentations. But we also ensure that we're making those connections between the past, present, and future, because the way our people perceive time is a lot different than the linear sense of time. And we also elevate First Nations arts diversity as well. So we know that many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander artists don't just do dots. We also do a whole variety of artistic cultural expressions, whether it's through sculpture, whether it's through jewellery making and things like that. And we also, centre the artist's voice, whether we do that through utilising their own words, whether it's in quote form, or expanding on their ideas about their artworks and their arts practice, and also including them in our digital programs too. And one of the key things as well is encouraging deep listening and thinking when we're presenting our programs online as well. So we might do this by asking particular questions to get students to really think a little bit deeper about key concepts or ideas, or about the artist's perspective as well. And one of the key things within this principle is truth-telling. So incorporating a truth-telling approach into our programs as well. And so with the art ways of learning principles, that really does inform how we deliver and how we deliver our approach. And also we have the Australian curriculum, cross-curriculum priority of focusing on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures. And our principles really do connect and speak to this framework as well. And so you can see the interconnectedness between people, culture, and place, with a really strong emphasis on living communities that really encompasses Indigenous identity. So they really do speak to each other. And so that's our approach. And so in our digital program, in the Art Ways of Learning program, we pose this question to our students: how do First Nations people express their culture and connection to country, to kind of frame the focus of what we're doing in that digital excursion at that particular point in time as well. And it's really good to start with that question and also think about how Indigenous philosophies informs artistic expressions. And so we focus on this one, for example, which is Chukulpa, which originates from the Unugu people in Central Australia. And Chukulpa in their language means story, but it also has deep, complex meanings. And it talks about a time in which ancestral beings travel along the landscape to create the world in which we have today. But Chukulpa really does revolve around the life of the Unugu. So it's really just kind of like an insight into Indigenous philosophies and wisdom, just to get a little bit of an understanding of Indigenous perspectives. And one of the artworks that we focus on here is the Jumpy Desert Weavers, the Seven Sister weaving installation that some of you might have heard about. That was a part of the Know My Name exhibition celebrating women artists across the sector. And here we have, a really beautiful photo which is situated on their country in Central Australia, connecting those weaving works and those stories to country, but also to the sky above, related to the ancestral story of the Seven Sisters. And through our program, we also show video to change it up a bit as well, but also bring in those visual ways of telling stories. And so Mirah is going to play a short clip for us, so get a bit of a look at it.
Getting that up. Here we go.
So there we have a short clip showing you the Jumpy Desert Weavers' work within our gallery. And it's just a really great way to show video within your digital programs as well. So you can get that sense of songs and stories and culture and how they're all really interconnected. Also have those nice close-up looks to really see the intricate details of the artworks as well. So the Jumpy Desert Weavers are a collective of Aboriginal weavers. And with the Seven Sisters story, it is probably one of the oldest stories that is still being told in the world today, which is really amazing. And Jumpy is a word that comes from their Pitjantjatjara language, which means wild grass. So we can see a lot of that wild grass weaved into their life-size sculptures to tell that amazing story. We can also see another photo where we can see the Seven Sisters in the gallery with the life-size Coolaman, which is a cultural object above the Seven Sisters as well, speaking to that story about how Wadi Nurin, who's in the background there with his hand over his forehead, pursuing the eldest sister, and talking about how they travelled over the country and eventually descending up into the sky, becoming the star Pleiades system that we see today, and Wadi landing in Orion's belt. So we can really see those connections between that ancestral story, how it's connected to understandings of and expressions of Tjukurpa, but also how that is expressed in contemporary ways as well. And in our digital program as well, we really like to show the artist process, so we can see all the lovely ladies here are part of the Jumpy Collective, out on their country collecting resources, making, processing those materials, and preparing them to be weaved and wrapped using a whole variety of different resources. So we can see how important it is to practice culture on country, but also share that with the world. And near the end of our digital excursion, we come and circle back to this question: how do First Nations people express their culture and connection to country? To allow the students to rethink this question and think about what they might have thought before being exposed and learning about First Nations arts and culture, but has their thoughts and their ideas or perspectives have changed? And so what do they think now? So we try to encourage a discussion-based approach. Also depends on the size of the class. If it's a smaller class, sometimes the students will come up to the laptop and speak to us directly, or we might have the teacher relay those questions so we can hear as well. And we also like to leave a art making activity for the students as well. So this one's called Woven Animals, which is based on the Jumpy Desert Weavers' works, based on responding to that artwork. So we ask the students to think of a place that they feel connected to and think about the kinds of animals that live there and the sounds that they make. And thinking about how birds collect natural materials, just like the Jumpy Desert Weavers, and how they construct their nests. And choose an animal that's a part of that ecosystem and construct your own woven sculpture with materials that you have at hand as well.
Thanks for that, Krystal. And so, look, I just wanted to come back to just look at how we're changing and adapting our digital excursions from where we started. So initially, I mentioned that we started with 2 presenters in there delivering from home and working just with a slide set. And we were concerned that there might be some difficulties with people with video over, distances in regional and remote areas with, perhaps not the same level of broadband capability as in cities. But I think too, with more recent generation of web-based, conferencing programs, that seems to be more of a thing of the past. But also, as Robert mentioned before, we've been looking at our team training and because we do work with a large team of casuals too, to be able to ensure that people are across the programs and how they're delivered, and also looking at having our run sheets to help co-presenters stick to time, but also doing testing with and connecting with the teacher ahead of time, and things like that help with ensuring that things run smoothly. And we've also been playing around with how you use audio when you've got an art making activity going, and so the music can set the tempo or the atmosphere that you want to create. It might even be the sound that they respond to through drawing as well. So there's interesting things to be had with looking at the multimedia experience of delivering digitally for creative engagement. And in terms of where we're going to next as well, we have been working with our resources online and created a new platform that was launched with Botticelli to Van Gogh, and which was our last major exhibition. And we've improved it, and soon we'll be launching the next resource with the Jeffrey Smart exhibition, where there is an audio alongside the learning resources. And with Botticelli to Van Gogh, we had the very traditional interpretation of the works that you could listen to. But with Jeffrey Smart, we're moving into something that's a lot more experiential, and we've been working with Liquid Architecture, who do a lot of sound art to create some quite immersive experiences. But this also helps give profile and prominence to the learning resource, and for teachers and students too, as you can see through this screenshot on the right. It's created for mobile device, so it is scrolling, but you can also select your own sets and send them to yourself. So then teachers could collect a group that they want to use with their students on a particular unit of work or the like. And so we're looking to adapt these very flexible resources that will provide some ways in which teachers and students can really curate their own selections. And the other thing too, which I was just going to show you if I switch over my tabs, is that we also have improved the search of the collection online. And so if I just take you to that, and we're going here to search the collection, and you can also search in not only by artist, name and medium, but you can also select through the Schools Online Thesaurus, which is a group of linked terms that relate to the collection. But let's have a look. I thought for you guys, let's have a look at New Zealand works. And if we have a look here, we can then go in and take a look at a work of art, but one of not only the things that are there is not only the work itself, but also an opportunity to find other works by the same artist, and also to find other works from the same year. So there's more ways in which we've got that related browsing that is being extended and provided through also an interface that is a lot more visual than our previous search the collection, which would really, and so this is a really exciting development in the galleries search the collection, and soon there will be a new website in about a week that you'll get to take a look at as well. So it's quite exciting to be able to share some of those things with you. So we've really been excited by the developments that working digitally has provided for us. And I think it has been a learning journey for us and the team as much as for schools and students. But I know that certainly from the beginning of 2020 to 2021, schools and students, of course, are a lot more familiar with getting online and finding digital learning experiences. And so we found that growth in the programs has been really exciting, and things like the maths digital excursion that we did was part of an initiative of DART Learning, which is connected to New South Wales Department of Education. DART stands for Distance and Rural Technology Learning, and I think the Portrait Gallery were part of that as well. But we had a group of Canberra institutions who did a virtual week in Canberra with DART, and so usually, you know, our on-site visitation is about 75% interstate schools coming, and education tourism is a really big part of the cultural institutions, you know, bread and butter from our sort of education perspective. And so to be able to do something like that virtual week in Canberra at a time when our doors were closed and nobody could visit us was a really inspiring thing. And so that really did show us the power of digital learning, and to be able to create really exciting and meaningful experiences for students, and to see them come back with their artworks inspired by our collection was also really fantastic. So yeah, thanks.
Thank you so much, both of you, for that amazing insight into some aspects of your program, and I particularly enjoyed hearing about the Indigenous approach to education. I'm sure that people here will be really fascinated by that, and yeah, the sort of comparing and contrasting from a Te Ao Māori perspective of education here. So yeah, that was fantastic. You've covered so much. We have actually got a couple of questions in the chat, and only like 2 or 3 minutes left before we need to close. So if you can give like a real short, snappy answer, I'll read them out. So Laura says, Robert, how much involvement from curators was there in developing your programs?
Well, we're always engaging with our curators, and a lot of our education programs are based on the exhibitions which are hung on our walls. So, and they are fully curated. So there is quite a cross-pollination of information when we're developing our education programs. That's probably the fastest way to answer that.
Great, snappy, like it. Thank you. And we've got one for you, Mirah. That database, is it custom built or is it publicly available tool?
Probably Keir Winesmith is our head of digital at the gallery, and he has been working with people internally and externally on that. I think it is something that we have especially built for the purposes of having that, but I'd be happy if you want to do a digital introduction to Keir to, yeah, you can follow up with him about that, I think, yeah.
And I think, Robert, thank you for replying to some of the questions in the chat. That's made it more manageable for us to get through the questions. I think maybe there's one that's still there about whether Canberra schools dial into your programs or whether they prefer to come in person.
I don't know, Mirah, if you have the same experience, but on the whole, Canberra schools do seem to come into our gallery all the time. Canberra schools are also locked down into a particular video conferencing platform, and we have had trouble engaging with them a little bit over the last while, but we have done sessions for Canberra schools, so it's a bit of a mixture of both.
Thank you.
Yeah,
one last quick question. Sorry to jump in there. This is for you, Mirah and Krystal. Did your digital programs come about as versions of your on-site programs, or have you developed digital programs that are only available online? And do you have any remarks about pricing, how much you charge to schools? So really, really quickly, because we're about to close.
Okay. Yes, we did start with the foundation of our on-site programs to develop online, but quite often we use different works of art because we're not limited by what's on the wall. 3,000 on the wall and about 160,000 in the collection. So there's a lot more choice. But there are some things that we've developed, although they existed on site, we've developed with specific works for online, like a digital drawing program, which we do on site, but we've done with completely different works online. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much, both of you. Well, that was a really, really fascinating presentation. And apologies to everybody, we're going to go probably a minute or two over time, but I think it was really worthwhile. And thank you for making yourselves available if people want to contact you past today's webinar. So we'll just tell you about our next webinar next year. So this is the last webinar for this year. We're going to be taking a break over the holiday period, and we're coming back again on Thursday, the 20th of January, 3:30 to 4:30, with Caroline Wallace from Parliament and Kieran Carr from Te Awamutu Museum, and they're going to be talking about how they've taken different approaches to developing, testing and delivering education programs online. So that would be really cool. We're also kicking off our mentoring program. So those of you who've indicated an interest in being part of the mentoring program, the first hui for that is on Wednesday, the 15th of December. So you should have received an invite. If you're interested and you haven't received an invite, get in touch with us and we'll send you one across. So just need to wish you all a wonderful holiday season, and we'll close with our karakia. Unuhia, unuhia. Unuhia ki te uru tapu nui, kia wātia, kia mama, te nākau, te tinana, te wairua, I te ara takatā. Koia rā I rongo, whakairia, ake ki runga. Kia tina, tina, huie, tai kie. Thank you everybody so much. It's really wonderful to see you, and we'll see you all in the new year.